Hi, Amanda. Not yet. Morrison, are you ready to roll? All right. We good to go, everybody? Okay. Good morning. Bonjour, Quay. Today is an exciting day, the culmination of many months of challenge, disruption, fear, unknown, and worry. But throughout it all, we've gotten to here. And because we are here, I feel as if we are starting the last leg of this marathon that we have been on together. So an exciting day for sure. The moving forward plan that Dr. Morrison will outline momentarily is one that is built on the same principles that we have followed since the beginning of this pandemic. It is a cautious, careful, and measured approach. That recipe has been a good one for us until now, and it will continue to be the one that guides us until we get through to the end. When it comes to reopening, we must remember that we are starting in a very different place than other provinces in this country, and that is essentially solely because of the hard work of Islanders who had been adhering to the public health restrictions. Because of that, we're in a better place than most. Our schools are open, our restaurants are open, we can gather in groups, both indoors and outdoors. Our children are able to play sports. Just a few examples of the minimal disruption that we've had in this province that would seem foreign to some of our other provincial counterparts. So that is a good place for us to be starting from. Fundamental to the moving forward plan is having Islanders getting their vaccinations and to continue to do so. The success of our 5-step plan is only possible if Islanders continue to roll up their sleeves, not just for the hard work that will be needed, but for their vaccinations as well. Based on the current forecasts of shipments, as Dr. Morrison will outline, of vaccinations, we are confident that 80% of Islanders will be vaccinated before the end of June with 1 dose, and that all second doses can be completed by September. But that will require Islanders continuing to sign up, to register, and to go out and get their vaccinations. We realize in making a plan such as this, like we did this time last year, that for some this plan will be too fast. For others, it will be too slow. Some will point out that other provinces or jurisdictions are doing this differently or doing that more quickly. Each jurisdiction will have their own unique plan, as we will outline today. For us, it has never been a race against one province or jurisdiction. This has been a long, cautious, methodical battle against COVID-19 and its variants. And our goal has been only to see the least amount of impact to the health, safety, and well-being of our citizens, as well as the overall economic and social health of our province in general. Our response from the beginning of this pandemic has first and foremost been a public health response, and we will continue to do that as we move forward. As circumstances change, we will adapt. Our plan is built for that, and it brings with it the ability to control our own destiny and to what we've all been waiting to do, to see the safe, careful return of doing the things that we like to do, like attending weddings, hosting backyard barbecues, or hugging a loved one, that normal island life that we all treasure, perhaps so much more so because COVID has stolen too much of that from us. And today, I think we make the cautious steps forward and to begin taking some of that back, and that's an exciting day for PEI. So with that, Dr. Morrison, I will turn it over to you and have you outline our exciting plan.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us. Today is an exciting day, and it is a time for us to discuss the plans to reopen our province and transition to the recovery phase of this global pandemic. And I know since the pandemic began, there are certain themes that we've talked about here at this very table, and that's having an attitude of gratitude, our hope and optimism, and working together and supporting one another are those three. And today is about being thankful for what we've been able to achieve together. To date, we have been successful in managing the pandemic by working together to limit importation and to manage cases when we've had outbreaks. We can be grateful that we've been able to manage through the times when we were scared and threatened by the virus. We are grateful that we have acted quickly and decisively when necessary, and we are grateful for the cooperation and support of island residents, businesses, organizations, municipalities, and communities. We can be grateful that, to date, no one has died as a result of COVID-19 in PEI. We can be grateful that our healthcare system has not been overwhelmed with COVID-19. And we can be very grateful that our children have benefited from in-class learning since last September. We can be grateful to the thousands of people who continue to be involved in the provincial pandemic response, who are working tirelessly to keep islanders safe. But today is also about hope and optimism. And we are hopeful that we are moving back into the new normal and adapting to life with COVID-19. We are hopeful that islanders will continue to step up and, as the Premier said, roll up their sleeves to be immunized. And as of last weekend, over 50% of eligible island residents have been immunized, and 83,740 doses of vaccine have been administered. Getting as many island residents as possible immunized as quickly as possible is important as we manage the final leg of our COVID-19 journey. We are hopeful that as more people are immunized, we will ease out of this pandemic safely. And finally, we are hopeful that our hard work over the last 15 months has set the stage for us to transition into the recovery phase of our response safely. I know I usually finish the briefings with a reminder for us all to be patient and kind. And today I thought I'd start with that too, so that more than ever over the next few weeks, we will need to be patient and kind with ourselves, fellow islanders, with each other, and travelers and family visiting PEI. Transitions are challenging, and the next few months will be no different. How we treat each other and the kindness, patience, and respect we show to others over weeks ahead will not go unnoticed. As we move into the COVID-19 and PEI moving forward plan, it really is, the purpose is to share the planning projections for public health measures in PEI, including travel measures, in the next few months. COVID-19 pandemic in Canada has brought about 3 waves of infection, with the third wave proving to be the most devastating in terms of cases and severe outcomes. The third wave has been linked to the presence of COVID-19 variants of concern, which have been more contagious and have resulted in more severe illness and hospitalization. But we are beginning to see signs that Canada is making steady progress in driving down COVID-19 infection rates. Nationally, the latest data indicates an average number of cases daily cases that is lower this week, 29% decrease from the week prior. We are also beginning to see a declining trend in severe outcomes, with 16% drop in hospitalizations and a 10% drop in ICU admissions this week compared to previous week. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge impact on the healthcare systems across the country and has clearly impacted many lives and families. Many thousands of individuals' lives and situations are forever changed as a result of losing loved ones to COVID-19. PEI has the lowest rate of COVID-19 cases in Canada. We have been fortunate, but we have also worked very hard. We have avoided a marked Wave 1, a more serious Wave 2, and a devastating Wave 3. We have not had any deaths related to the virus. PEI has maintained strong border controls, and since emerging from the initial lockdown put in place in March 2020, many activities, as the Premier mentioned, including schools, sports, worship services, and personal gatherings with close friends and family, have continued with few limitations and interruptions. Our successes have been the result of the dedication and hard work of island residents, businesses, and organizations in following public health guidance. In PEI, as of this morning, there have been 200 cases of COVID-19 and no deaths. Instead of waves, and we've talked about it previously, we were wanting to have a slow burn of cases over the course of the pandemic. But we also have had some scares and outbreaks with community transmission. We've required circuit breaker measures and red alert level restrictions. And despite the success of PEI's pandemic measures, COVID-19 has been difficult for all island residents. The health, social, and economic impacts of COVID-19 will continue to be balanced against the measures needed to address the pandemic. We've talked about it before as well. The primary goals of the pandemic response in PEI continue to be to minimize serious illness and mortality and to reduce societal disruption. As we've mentioned, PEI is in a unique position, and our starting point for reopening is different than other provinces. Residents of PEI have demonstrated their commitment to the public health measures since the pandemic began 15 months ago. And the measures contained in this moving forward plan are possible in large part due to the steadfast support, patience, and cooperation of islanders, businesses, organizations, municipalities, and community. The availability of safe, effective vaccines does give us hope, and the objective of the vaccine program really is to get another very important layer of protection for our islanders. There will be breakthrough cases of COVID-19 in people who are immunized, meaning the vaccine provides good protection but is not 100%. And we will continue to learn more about the effectiveness of the approved vaccines against the variants of concern. I think it's important to note one vaccine is good, but 2 doses of vaccine is better. There will be enough vaccine for everyone who is eligible and who wants to be immunized. Here is really a slide of the cumulative total doses of the mRNA vaccine that we've received and are anticipated to come into the province. We will have additional doses of AstraZeneca as well, which aren't included in this table. The vaccination target for people aged 12 years of age and older in PEI is 80%. And as I mentioned, the total percentage of those who've received at least 1 dose of vaccine in PEI is over 50%, and 8.8% of those 12 years of age and older have received 2 doses. This is just a visual of those individuals by decade who've received at least 1 dose of the vaccine in this province, and that continues to be updated regularly. The purpose of the COVID-19 plan really is to try to safely guide PEI through these last months of the global pandemic, and it is based on the best available evidence and ongoing risk assessment. It is a 5-step process which will enable the reopening of the province and easing of the public health restrictions. There are certain factors needed for moving forward. 1, the level of disease is low and transmission is controlled, and also vaccination targets. And I will mention that the moving forward plan is based also on several principles. First, the vaccine status of island residents and visitors will be critical to ensuring safe easing of measures. Steps in the plan have been designed to allow time for as many island residents to be immunized as possible, and protecting the health of island residents is our top priority. Second, COVID-19 testing for travelers at the point of entry will support early detection of infection and limit transmission of the virus. Third, self-isolation for travelers arriving to PEI will continue to play a role, although self-isolation requirements will gradually be reduced. And finally, general public health measures such as physical distancing and masking in certain situations will continue to provide a solid foundation for the moving forward plan, with the potential for easing many of these measures in the fall. As I mentioned, the moving forward plan is in 5 steps. Each step is associated with a certain date. There's a minimum of 3 weeks between the steps, and this is recommended as well by the Public Health Agency of Canada to have a minimum of 3 weeks and also to go slowly. This will be adjusted if we need to, and dates will be confirmed 5 days prior to the estimated start date. It is based on that principle of protecting island residents, and until we are able to be fully vaccinated, there will be some travel measures that will remain in place. It's good to note that each of these steps really alternates between public health measures and travel measures. And you'll see public health measures, travel measures alternating through those first steps. The first step of moving forward will start on June the 6th, 2021. And I'll highlight a couple of points in each of the steps. This first step will include an increase in personal gatherings to 20 people. And currently it is a household plus 10, and this will go up to 20. And these internal public health measures that start on June the 6th are really for islanders before we start discussing further travel measures. Organized gatherings on June the 6th, as part of step 1, there'll be an increase in the number of people who can attend a funeral. Currently, the limit is 100, and this will go up to 150 in cohorts of 50. And there will be more people able to attend a wedding. Currently, it's at 100 for a ceremony and 50 at a reception. And on June 6th, a maximum of 150 can attend a wedding and a reception, provided it is hosted by a recognized business or organization. And any organized gathering that has more than 50 people in attendance must be hosted by a recognized business or organization with an approved operational plan. Organized gatherings may be held on personal property. And this is a change from the current measures. Individuals can also host special occasion events, such as a backyard wedding, perhaps a shower or an anniversary function on their property for up to 50 people, provided they have an operational plan reviewed by the office. The second step, which is now more focused on travel, is June the 27th. And this is associated with one of our vaccination targets. And at this point, 80% of islanders should have received at least or be eligible to have 1 dose of vaccine. And also the second of 2 doses of vaccine will have been received by 80% of certain vulnerable populations, long-term care residents and those over age 80, for example. And on June 27th, for people coming to PI from Atlantic, Canada, there will be no travel streams or pre-travel approval. Individuals will be required to complete a self-declaration form similar to last year. And people traveling within Atlantic, Canada who are fully or partially vaccinated will be required to test, but will not need to self-isolate. And this applies equally to islanders who are leaving and coming back to Prince Edward Island within the region, as well as visitors from Atlantic, Canada. Unvaccinated travelers from within Atlantic, Canada will have a shortened self-isolation period. An announcement will be made in mid-June regarding the length of the shortened self-isolation period. Everyone entering PEI will be tested at the points of entry. Moving forward, step 3, again focused on public health measures, is for on July 18th. There'll be some easing of non-medical mask requirements. For example, there will be no longer having to wear a mask in indoor public places when individuals are seated physically distant from each other, such as when watching a performance or attending a worship service. We will also be moving to hosting larger gatherings with cohorts of 100 indoors and 200 outdoors. Up to 200 people will be able to attend a wedding, a ceremony, and reception following cohort limits. And with these increased cohort sizes, multiple gatherings with a pre-approved operational plan will be reviewed, and particularly those plans that are outside. Activities that require close contact, such as sports, performance, are limited to a single cohort of 100 per day, but that is an increase from the 50. Moving forward in step 4, on August the 8th, 3 weeks later, is again focused on travel and a vaccination target. At this point, the second of 2 doses of vaccine should have been received by at least 50% of island residents aged 12 years of age and older. In terms of travel within Atlantic Canada, there will be no change from step 2, but effective August 8th, fully vaccinated domestic travelers from outside Atlantic Canada will be able to travel to PI with pre-travel approval under an existing travel stream. And those travel streams, to remind people which are in place at the present time, are for compassionate reasons, for family connections, for work, and for seasonal. Fully vaccinated island, and these, when they come here under the pre-travel and under existing travel stream, they would not have to self-isolate and they would be tested on arrival. Fully vaccinated island residents will be able to travel within Canada and not have to self-isolate upon returning home, subject to testing. And finally, moving forward, step 5, and this is another vaccination target where the second of 2 doses of vaccine is received by 80% of PI residents aged 12 years of age and older. And this is where we will lift many of our public health measures. So no personal gathering limits, no organized gathering limits, no restrictions in terms of sports and rec, no restrictions with businesses and NGOs, and full-time classroom learning, K-12, and full-time classroom learning post-secondary would be in place, and unrestricted visitation if vaccination threshold is maintained. In terms of the travel with step 5, there'd be no further pre-travel approval or travel streams for visitors from Canadian provinces and territories. There may still be some isolation and testing measures recommended for unvaccinated and partially vaccinated travelers, particularly international, and that will be dependent on many of our federal measures. There would be no testing at points of entry, only testing if you are symptomatic, and there would be no further border screening. We expect the public health state of emergency will be lifted in September at this time. In the fall, we will transition to living with COVID-19 as we live with many other communicable diseases. So in summary, moving forward balances safe reopening and the need to protect the health of island residents while reducing the risk of serious illness and minimizing societal disruption. Vaccination status of island residents and visitors and testing upon entry to the province are really key, important protection measures. The approach allows more time for islanders to be vaccinated as PI gradually reopens to travel and eases public health measures. Final decisions regarding the reopening to travel and easing public health measures will be based on achieving PI vaccine targets, as well as a low level of disease and controlled transmission. The steps and measures outlined in moving forward are time limited. They are in place for now and not forever. And as we transition through the next few months, an increasing number of island residents will be immunized. And similar to our whole pandemic response, it is about balance, balancing the risk of importation with the need to reopen to travel and ease public health measures safely to protect the health of islanders. We know, the Premier mentioned this as well, that this will be too slow for some and too fast for others, and we have heard this many times throughout the pandemic. And how do you get that gradual, measured approach with the desire to reopen and get back to normal? So we've planned for the minimum of 3 weeks between the easing of measures to make sure that we can determine the impact of changes and at the same time allowing time for more islanders to be vaccinated. And we've learned from the experience of other jurisdictions over the last year, there are dangers of reopening too fast. The pandemic has been a long and at times a grueling road trip, and the end is in our sight. And someone made the reference to me yesterday that the most dangerous part of the road trip is when you start and when you're close to home. And so we must remain focused with our eyes on the road, and it's not the time yet to throw caution to the wind. It's important that we continue to adhere to the basic public health measures that we've talked about for so long, our physical distancing, our hand washing, staying home when you're sick, and getting tested if you have any symptoms. We will finish our road trip in the same way as we got to this point, slowly, steadily, safely, and in a balanced manner. So in closing, let us continue to be patient and kind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morrison. Have a drink of water. You've earned it for sure. Before we take questions, I would just say again to reiterate there are many unknowns still in this journey with COVID. We'll work to address the issues as they arise, as we have done throughout, but feel this is a really good and exciting day, a really good start to the road back to normal for Islanders. So with that, I will turn it over to questions from our friends in the media. So,
Brittany Spencer, CBC. Hi there. Yes, my first question is about the shorter isolation period that was mentioned for those who are partially vaccinated. I was just wondering if you could provide a little more clarification on what that shorter isolation period means and what that could look like.
Hi, Brittany. So we know, and we've talked about the 14-day period of isolation throughout this pandemic. We know that the risk of converting to a positive is certainly less in the last few days of that isolation period. So one of the things that we are looking at is when you have lower disease level circulating across the country and in the region, and you have more people vaccinated, are we able to shorten that isolation period to between 7 and 10 days and make sure people are then tested out of that shortened isolation period and with still a very small or negligible risk. And so that is certainly what not only PI would be looking at, but they are looking at that nationally as well.
Okay, thank you. And my next question, maybe both of you might want to weigh in on this one, but I'm just wondering how our plan on PEI lines up with the other Atlantic provinces. There are rules in place for people coming to travel here, but will they be able to travel back then, or will there be other restrictions in place in other provinces they need to adhere to, or will it be similar to what the Atlantic bubble looked like last summer?
I can start. We had a call last night with Atlantic premiers where I outlined where we are going. As I say, each individual jurisdiction for the time being will have their own regulations and restrictions, but I suspect that we will all be essentially aligned toward the end of June with the movement of Atlantic Canadians via the Atlantic bubble whenever we could come to a date that all are comfortable with. I think what we have outlined in this plan, thanks to the hard work of Dr. Morrison and so many others, is that we want to be able to be in a situation where we control a little bit more of our own destiny. So even if there are flare-ups in other parts of the region, even on June 27th, if we come to an Atlantic bubble as a region, we will still maintain that rapid testing at our points of entry as an added level of security for us. And we feel that just gives us the ability to say on June 27th, we're open for business. We hope that we can do so with the Atlantic region as a whole like we did last year. But for that added level of security as we work toward the vaccination targets that we have, we would maintain that testing. So I think overall, Brittany, we're on the same page in the general sense across the region. We're all working on a very similar dates, but each individual jurisdiction will need to outline their plans, and I'm sure they will in the days ahead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Louise Martin, CBC.
Hi, boy, getting CBC done off the top here. Nice to see you both. Thanks for this, and hate to embarrass you, Dr. Morrison, but happy birthday to you today.
Happy birthday.
So a lot of this is based on vaccination and infection rates and contingent on that. So can you give any update on when Islanders will be able to book their second shots? Right now, I believe we're still on first shots for the majority of people. And will you be giving AstraZeneca as a second shot for people who had their first dose?
Hi, Louise. Thank you. So actually, the second doses have already, appointments have actually already started to be booked for many people in the clinics, and they actually have been moved from 16 weeks down to between 12 and 14 weeks after their first dose. So those second dose appointments have started to happen in June for many, many people. In terms of AstraZeneca, we anticipate within the next week, certainly I'm hoping the guidance around from NACI about the second dose recommendations for those who received AstraZeneca the first dose, and we will have AstraZeneca available if that is the recommendation, or if there's a choice, informed consent if some people are going to be choosing between AstraZeneca and an mRNA vaccine. So we will have more information on second doses for AstraZeneca in the next week or so, I'm hopeful. But second dose appointments have started for certain age groups at the end of June.
Thank you. And what about proof of vaccination at the border? Will that be something that will be required as people come? Because a lot of this is based on whether you've had one shot, two shots, or no shots. And what about kids under the age of 12 who have not been vaccinated because there isn't an approved vaccine for those under 12 and they're traveling with their vaccinated parents? Well, what happens there?
Right. So I'll answer both parts of the question. The second part first. So children who are traveling with their vaccinated parents, they would not, don't have a vaccine approved yet in this country, so of course they would not require a vaccine before entry. And usually they would make sure that the parents are tested, and we know most transmission would happen from adult to child, so it would be, for instance, a vehicle with two parents and two children under the age of 12 that are coming, then they would come, and the two parents would have tests at the points of entry, and if negative, they would not require self-isolation after June 27th within the Atlantic region.
So, yeah, so on your self-declaration form that you'll fill out, there will be a box to check for your vaccination status, and you'll be asked to prove by your screeners and testers at the border to produce that document.
Yeah, so it'll be an overall part of the sort of screening process at the border with rapid testing, proof of vaccination. That'll all be part of the parcel when you arrive to PEI.
Louise, we're certainly working out some of the final details of that process, and I know there will be more questions on that, and so we have had some initial conversations about what is going to be the easiest from a process point of view. We don't want to hold up folks at the border as well, but certainly vaccination status will be important, but the details around exactly what needs to be shown will be definitely made clear before the June 27th.
All right, thank you very much, and again, happy birthday. Thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you.
Dave Stewart, The Guardian.
Good afternoon to you both, and a happy birthday to Dr. Morrison. Obviously, great plan. The thought of going back to normal by September almost doesn't feel, well, I guess it feels kind of surreal. But, as we go along, we're hoping the numbers will continue to go down as more people get vaccinated. If those numbers in the Atlantic region should shoot up, I mean, does increased restrictions or a shutdown, does that become, is that something that's floating within your consideration?
Hi. I mean, I'm hopeful that we don't have to do those kinds of restrictions, but absolutely, if we need to, these are all plans based that will, if we need to, we'll make adjustments as we go forward. And that's both if we need to be more restrictive at certain points in time because of what's going on, that could happen. But also, if things are going really well, we may be able to even change the dates a little bit earlier, particularly the one in September. So I think we will continue to monitor, and I think I heard my colleague in British Columbia say never, but I certainly hope if we do this gradually and carefully and we the epidemiology supports it across the country and the region, that we won't have to do the same kinds of restrictions that we've had to do in the past.
Great, thank you very much. And just wanted to clarify, you had mentioned mask wearing there briefly. Where we're going with mask wearing, I think you said that people won't have to wear them at some point if they're sitting down, in a restaurant, obviously, or at a show. Do you see mask wearing being mandated, or do you see mask wearing not being mandated at any point this year?
I think one of the things we talked about is that in the fall, so in September, for instance, masks might still be required on public transit, for instance, and so in certain situations, but it wouldn't be the same requirement that we have in place now. So I think, again, that is a public health measure that has been in place now for a number of months, and we'll ease out of it just the same way we're doing some of the other measures.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Natasha Pace, CTV.
Thank you. My questions have actually been asked. Thank you, though.
Oh, thank you. That's because Louise Martin asked 5 questions in her too, by the way, but I'm joking. I'm joking.
Mike Robar, The Guardian.
Good afternoon to you both. So I've got a couple questions around sort of what these changes might mean for those looking to relocate permanently to the island. So as it stands right now, after June 8th, there's sort of a 500 household limit on people being able to enter. So what does this plan do to sort of affect that?
Hi. So I think it will be a little dependent as well on where you're relocating from. At this point in time, if you're relocating from within Atlantic Canada, it may look different for a period of time than if you're relocating from elsewhere. But at this point in time, relocation is by so many people per week, and that's with our family connections and seasonals. And if you are relocating here for work from Ontario, there's the negative test before you arrive. There's the testing process 3 times when you arrive, and you're in self-isolation for that period of 2 weeks. And really, until sometime in August, that would continue if you were relocating from Ontario.
And then I'm also sort of curious about, since these particular restrictions were put in place and everything was pushed to June 8th for those for the majority of those relocations, is there much of a backlog of people waiting to move to the island?
I have not heard of any backlog of people in terms of relocating to the island. I've seen the numbers that started on, June 3rd for each week into June, and the last I heard, I think yesterday morning, was that they certainly hadn't maxed out that 500 per week for all the weeks of June. So I think there's certainly still room in certain weeks in June to for family connections and seasonals, but I know they're working through those applications on a daily basis.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tom Bateman, Brunswick News.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you for taking my question. I wonder what coordination, if any, there was with the other Atlantic provinces on this reopening plan ahead of today's release.
Hi, I think the Premier may have answered that in a previous response a bit, but and you may want to speak to it again. But I think certainly our Atlantic epidemiologists meet on a regular basis and have for weeks. I know I have weekly conversations with the Atlantic medical officers of health and the chief health officers as my colleagues, and we did have a conversation last evening as well. As the Premier mentioned, we really would like to be as coordinated as possible, but we're all in slightly different positions, as you're aware, in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So we have different starting points, but really it's up to the premiers, I think, they've continued to have that conversation from an Atlantic perspective, so.
Yeah, I think like we are in regular, constant contact as Atlantic premiers. We met again last night and discussed many things of interest and joint interest across the region. But I think as Dr. Morrison has outlined and I tried to articulate earlier, is that everybody's in a little bit of a different place here right now. I think fundamentally we will get very similarly to the same dates and spaces. I think each plan across the country will be based fundamentally on a lot of the factors that we use, and that is the caseload across the country, the epidemiology, the vaccination rates. So I think we're all essentially in unison in that regard. And I think from the Atlantic bubble perspective, as I say, I think you'll see at or around the same time we will have travel moving back and forth like it did last year. But the added level of security for us to have the testing doesn't essentially impact the Atlantic bubble date for us now. I think because we're able to do that as an island province, and because we have some time to train those to do the rapid testing and stuff, that gives us a little more autonomy from our own perspective. But I think the ideal plan would be for all of us to do this at or around the same time, and I do think we'll get there at some point.
That's great. I just have another question about how the detection of new or more dangerous variants of COVID-19 would affect these plans. Are we fully confident that the current set of vaccines would mitigate any of those concerns?
Hi, I think I had one of the slides up about some of the, the evidence that we're seeing, particularly out of the United Kingdom, around the effectiveness of 1 dose versus 2 dose, and whether it's a Pfizer or AstraZeneca. Certainly the effectiveness after 1 dose of the vaccine is not as good against some of the variants of concern, and it really depends on which variant of concern. But we know 2 doses is really important, and you get better protection against the variants of concern that have been circulating and have been identified to date. But I think it's part of that whole picture. If we need to adjust based on new information, we will do that as we go forward. But hopefully as soon as we can get our Canadians and those in the Atlantic area and Islanders protected to a level where we can try to have some herd protection here and not have big outbreaks of illness, I think I'm hoping that we'll be in a better spot and not have to make any further adjustments.
That's great. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marine Arnaud, La Voix.
Good afternoon to you both. J'ai une question pour vous en français, Dr Morrison. Concernant les critères pour les personnes, les insulaires partiellement vaccinées, comment peut-on prouver qu'on a reçu une dose de vaccin?
Bonjour. Alors, pour les insulaires qui ont reçu un vaccin ou 2 doses, 1 dose ou 2 doses, vous pouvez avoir, à ce moment, je sais qu'ils ont beaucoup de travail à propos de ça, mais à ce moment, vous pouvez avoir vraiment un courriel qui donne vraiment la date et quel vaccin. Et puis, je sais que Santé publique et les pharmacies peuvent les donner votre record pour être vacciné. Et je pense que qu'est-ce qu'il veut faire vraiment, d'avoir comme, si c'est comme un app ou quelque chose sur votre téléphone qui peut montrer la date de vaccination.
D'accord, merci. Et deuxième question, je pense que vous avez déjà un peu répondu en anglais, mais le masque demeure un élément essentiel dans le plan jusqu'à l'automne. Et je voulais savoir pourquoi ne pas lever le port du masque plus rapidement pour les personnes vaccinées comme aux États-Unis.
Oui, à propos des masques, on commence vraiment mi-juillet, le 18 juillet, avec enlever les masques si vous êtes assis et avoir la distance physique entre les autres à l'église ou des concerts. Alors, on commence là. C'est vraiment aussi on écoute la direction du pays et l'Agence de santé publique nationale que les masques, jusqu'au bout de temps que la majorité de la population ont un niveau de vaccination pour nous, c'est 80%. C'est important quand même d'en emporter comme une autre mesure. On a des niveaux, toutes sortes de choses qu'on fait, les testings, les tests, les vaccins, les masques. C'est tout ensemble aide à nous protéger comme population contre le COVID-19.
Afternoon. Ma question est en français pour la Dr. Heather Morrison. Je sais que vous avez déjà répondu quelques éléments de cette question en anglais, mais j'aimerais l'entendre en français. Alors, vous avez dit que pour certains, on y va trop rapidement avec ce plan de déconfinement, et alors que pour d'autres, on n'y va pas assez vite. Mais, Dr. Morrison, est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer pourquoi vous avez conseillé le Premier ministre à présenter ce plan de réouverture maintenant? Pourquoi ceci c'est le plan idéal pour l'île en ce moment?
Bonjour. Et puis, je ne sais pas s'il y a un plan idéal, mais je sais que toutes les provinces sont en train, et les territoires aussi, sont en train de présenter des plans, mais on commence tout on est tout un peu différents entre les provinces et territoires. Pour nous, je pense que c'est un plan qui va pas trop vite. Faut faire attention. Il y a 3 semaines au moins entre les steps, les pas qu'on prend. Et alors, je pense que c'est une balance entre essayer de protéger les gens avec des mesures en place, avec les tests, avec le niveau de vaccination pour la population, pour les insulaires. Et on ne va pas trop vite. Alors, je pense que c'est un plan que c'est pas comme peut-être les autres, mais c'est bon pour nous d'essayer de balancer la protection des insulaires et d'ouvrir pour qu'on peut entrer dans une étape plus normale ici à l'île Prince-Édouard.
Mm-hmm. Et avec ce plan, vous donnez quand même un peu d'espoir aux opérateurs touristiques de l'île pour cette prochaine saison estivale. Il va y avoir quelques allègements concernant les visiteurs ici. Alors, quel message vous aimeriez envoyer aux opérateurs touristiques avec ce plan-là? Quel message vous aimeriez leur dire passer aujourd'hui?
Je pense que c'est un plan qui, pour les personnes qui travaillent dans le tourisme, ça va donner plus de personnes ici que l'année passée. Pas peut-être le même nombre que 2019, mais j'espère que c'est une année qui c'est un peu meilleure que l'année passée. Et l'automne devrait être même mieux que juillet. Alors, ça avance chaque mois.
Ok, parfait.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
Bonne journée.
Julien Lecachère, Radio-Canada.
Good morning or good afternoon now. Dr. Morrison, une question pour vous. Vous parlez dans l'étape numéro 4, voyage autorisé à l'extérieur du Canada Atlantique sans isolement pour les voyageurs entièrement vaccinés et un isolement raccourci pour les non vaccinés ou partiellement vaccinés. Pouvez-vous m'expliquer, Dr. Morrison, en gros, est-ce que ça veut dire qu'une personne qui n'aura reçu qu'une seule dose du vaccin, à son retour à l'île du Prince-Édouard, à partir du 8 août, il devra s'isoler 5 jours, 7 jours, 10 jours, et combien de tests devra-t-il faire?
Bonjour. Alors, pour les visiteurs qui est comme une famille qui vient ici ou pour les insulaires qui voyagent hors de la région atlantique et qui retournent, s'ils ont seulement une dose, ils vont avoir une période d'isolement qui va être raccourcie. Et puis, ça va vraiment dépendre plus proche de où. Si c'est 7 jours à 10 jours, et ça va être test à l'entrée et puis un test aussi à 7 à 10 jours. Mais ça va dépendre vraiment sur l'épidémiologie à ce moment et ce qu'on apprend à propos de l'effet des vaccins aussi à l'île du Prince-Édouard, mais partout au pays. Mais c'est plus court que les 14 jours. Mais à ce moment, on imagine qu'au moins 50% des insulaires soient vaccinés avec les 2 doses par le 8 août et même peut-être plus que ça.
Donc justement, Dr. Morrison, pour cette vaccination avec les 2 doses, vous le rappelez, 80% de la population avec les 2 doses d'ici la fin septembre. Est-ce que ça veut dire que l'écart entre les 2 doses va toujours être d'environ 12 semaines? C'est ça votre objectif?
Je m'excuse. C'était en premier d'essayer de s'assurer que les insulaires ont au moins une dose avant que beaucoup de personnes ont la 2e dose. Mais maintenant, avec plus de vaccins qui arrivent à l'île du Prince-Édouard pendant juillet et août, on va peut-être raccourcir cette période. Alors, si vous êtes vacciné le fin juin, vous êtes certainement, on aura assez de vaccins, peut-être 6 semaines, 6 à 8 semaines avant un autre vaccin, si on a assez de vaccins qui arrivent ici. Et c'est pour cette raison qu'on peut s'assurer que même les jeunes qui sont 12 à 15 ans, qui soient vaccinés en juin, avant qu'ils commencent l'école en septembre, ils vont avoir la chance d'être vaccinés avec 2e dose.
Merci beaucoup pour ces précisions, Dr. Morrison. Bonne journée.
Bonne journée.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I believe that brings an end to our media questions. So thank you, Dr. Morrison, as well, for a great bit of news here today, and to all Islanders, Stay safe, practice the protocols, and let's continue to work through this together. So have a good day.